Have you ever experienced this? You stayed silent, you controlled your emotions, you chose not to react, and yet, nothing changed. You thought your silence would make them realize your value. You believed that by not responding, they would understand, but instead, they ignored you even more. And that's where most people break, because they've been taught their whole life. Stay quiet and everything will be fine. But the truth is, silence doesn't work in every situation. Some people don't respect your silence. They don't understand it. They mistake it for weakness. And this is where Stoic philosophy teaches something powerful. Silence is strength, but only as long as it creates impact. The moment your silence stops affecting others, it stops being power and starts becoming invisibility. People begin to ignore you. They take you for granted. They lose respect without even realizing it. And slowly, your presence fades. This is the moment where most people make a mistake. They either keep staying silent and lose themselves, or they react emotionally and lose control. But a Stoic does neither. A Stoic understands one important truth. There is a time to stay silent, and there is a time to act. In this video, we will talk about 5 powerful Stoic steps you must take when your silence no longer works. These steps will help you regain respect, take control without aggression, become powerful without saying too much. Because remember this, silence is power, but the right action at the right time is even more powerful. Step 1. Stop expecting your silence to change people. One of the biggest mistakes people make is believing that their silence will change others. They think that if they stay quiet, if they stop reacting, if they withdraw their attention, the other person will eventually realize their mistake. But most of the time, that doesn't happen. Instead, something very different happens. The other person becomes comfortable. They get used to your silence. They stop taking you seriously. They begin to assume that you will tolerate anything, and slowly, without realizing it, your silence loses its power. Stoic philosophy explains this very clearly. The Stoics believed that you cannot control how other people think, behave, or respond. Expecting someone to change just because you chose silence is an illusion. People don't change because you stay quiet. They change when they face consequences. This is a hard truth, but it is necessary to understand. When you remain silent without any action, you are not setting a boundary. You are creating permission. Permission for them to continue the same behavior. Permission for them to disrespect you. Permission for them to ignore your value. And over time, this damages your self-respect. Because deep inside, you know something is wrong, but you are not doing anything to change it. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself of a simple principle. Focus on what you can control. You cannot control other people's behavior, but you can control your response, and your response is not limited to silence. Silence is only one tool, but if you rely on it in every situation, it becomes ineffective. Imagine this clearly. If someone disrespects you once and you stay silent, it may create curiosity. If they repeat the same behavior and you stay silent again, it creates comfort. If it continues, your silence starts to look like acceptance. This is where the shift must happen. A Stoic does not expect others to change out of kindness. A Stoic understands that behavior changes when patterns are broken, and breaking patterns requires action. This does not mean emotional reactions. It does not mean anger, shouting, or losing control. It means intentional action. It means changing how you respond. It means removing your availability. It means reducing your attention. It means stepping back without explaining everything. Because when your behavior changes, the dynamic changes. People start noticing the difference, not because you demanded respect, but because you stopped tolerating disrespect. This is the key idea. Stop expecting your silence to do the work for you. Silence alone is not enough. If there is no shift in your actions, nothing will change. The Stoics believed in calm strength, not passive suffering. There is a difference. Passive people stay silent and hope things improve. Strong people stay silent when needed, but act when required. And this balance is what creates real power. Because when you combine silence with action, you send a message that cannot be ignored. A message that says, I am calm, but I am not weak. And once that message is clear, everything begins to change. Step 2. Withdraw your attention strategically. When silence stops working, the next step is not to speak more. It is to control where your attention goes. Most people don't realize this, but attention is power. Where your attention goes, your energy flows. And where your energy flows, value is created. This is why people crave attention so much. They may not admit it, but attention validates them. It makes them feel important. It gives them a sense of control in the relationship. Now here is the mistake most people make. Even when they stay silent, they still give attention. They watch everything. They think about the person constantly. They stay emotionally invested, so even though they are not speaking, they are still involved. And the other person feels it. They know you are still there. They know you still care. They know they haven't lost your attention. So nothing changes. This is why Stoic philosophy emphasizes detachment over silence. Silence without detachment is weak, but silence with detachment is powerful. Epictetus taught that attachment to external things, especially people's behavior, creates emotional dependence, and emotional dependence destroys your inner power, because the moment someone realizes you are emotionally dependent on them, the balance shifts. They stop valuing your presence, they stop respecting your boundaries, they begin to take you for granted. This is why you must learn to withdraw your attention strategically, not out of anger, not to punish them, but to protect your energy. This means you stop reacting internally as well as externally. You stop checking their actions, you stop overthinking their behavior, you stop waiting for them to change. Instead, you redirect your focus toward yourself, your growth, your work, your discipline, your life. This shift is powerful because now your energy is no longer tied to someone who does not value it. And something interesting happens when you do this. People start noticing your absence, not your silence, your absence, because silence can still be presence. But absence creates space, and that space forces people to feel the difference. When your attention is no longer available, your value increases. This is not manipulation. This is natural psychology. People often appreciate what they no longer have access to. But here is the important part. You must do this genuinely. If you withdraw attention only to get a reaction, it becomes a game, and games destroy your peace. Stoic philosophy is not about playing games. It is about self-control. You withdraw your attention because you understand your value. You stop investing where there is no return. You stop giving energy where there is no respect. And when you do this consistently, your mindset changes. You become less reactive, less dependent, more focused. Your world becomes smaller but stronger. You no longer spread your energy everywhere. You concentrate it where it matters. And that concentration creates power, because a person who controls their attention controls their life. This is why the Stoics valued inner discipline so deeply. They understood that external situations will always change. People will come and go. Respect will rise and fall. But if you control your attention, you remain stable, and stability is strength. So the second lesson is simple. If your silence is not working, stop giving attention where it is not valued, because sometimes the strongest message is not what you say, but what you stop giving. Step 3. Set boundaries without explaining yourself. When silence fails and attention is no longer working, the next step is something most people struggle with: setting boundaries. Not emotional reactions, not arguments, not long explanations, just clear, calm boundaries. The reason most people avoid boundaries is simple. They are afraid of conflict, afraid of losing people, afraid of being misunderstood. So instead of setting limits, they tolerate behavior that slowly destroys their self-respect. They stay quiet, they adjust, they keep giving chances, and over time, this creates a pattern. People learn how far they can go with you, because boundaries were never clearly defined. Stoic philosophy teaches something very different. The Stoics believed that self-respect comes from living according to your principles, not from pleasing others. And boundaries are simply the external expression of your internal standards. If you don't set boundaries, you don't have standards. And if you don't have standards, people will treat you based on their convenience. This is why boundaries are necessary. But here's the mistake most people make. When they finally decide to set boundaries, they over-explain. They try to justify their decision. They try to make the other person understand everything. They try to avoid hurting feelings, and in doing so, they weaken their own position. Because the more you explain, the more you invite debate. People start questioning your reasons. They try to negotiate your limits. They push back, and suddenly your boundary becomes a discussion instead of a decision. This is where Stoic thinking becomes powerful. A Stoic does not over-explain. A Stoic remains calm and clear. They don't need to convince anyone. They simply act. For example, instead of saying,
"I feel like you've been disrespecting me lately and it's affecting me, so I think maybe we should take some space." A Stoic approach is different. You reduce interaction. You change availability. You stop engaging in situations that cross your limits. No drama, no emotional speech, just action. Because actions set boundaries more effectively than words. Marcus Aurelius believed that your behavior should reflect your values without needing constant explanation. If something goes against your principles, you step away. Not angrily, not loudly, just clearly. This kind of boundary is powerful because it is calm. There is no emotional chaos. And that calmness sends a strong message. I respect myself enough to not tolerate this. People may not like it. They may question it. They may react to it. But that is not your concern. Your responsibility is not to manage their feelings. Your responsibility is to protect your peace. And once you understand this, setting boundaries becomes easier. You stop asking for permission to respect yourself. You stop feeling guilty for choosing your own well-being. You stop trying to make everyone comfortable at your own expense. Instead, you begin acting with quiet confidence. And this changes everything. Because when people see that your behavior has changed, and that you are not explaining or negotiating, they start taking your presence more seriously. Not because you demanded respect, but because you demonstrated it. And that is the essence of Stoic strength. Not loud dominance, but calm control. So remember this, if your silence is not working, set boundaries through action, not explanation. Because the moment you stop explaining your value, people are forced to recognize it. Step 4. Stop being emotionally available to everyone. One of the biggest reasons your silence stops working is this: you are still emotionally available. You may not be talking, you may not be reacting, but internally, you are still there. You still care deeply, you still think about them, you still feel affected by their actions, and people can sense this. Even without words, emotional availability is visible. Through your behavior, through your reactions, through your consistency. This is why nothing changes, because even though you are silent, you are still accessible. Stoic philosophy teaches that true strength comes from emotional control, not just external silence. There is a difference between being quiet and being detached. Most people are quiet, but still emotionally involved. A Stoic becomes detached, not cold, not careless, but controlled. Epictetus explained that when you attach your emotions to things you cannot control, especially people, you give them power over your peace. The more emotionally available you are to someone who does not value you, the more control they gain. They know you will still respond. They know you will still care. They know they still have access. And as long as that access exists, nothing changes. This is why you must reduce emotional availability. This does not mean becoming rude or ignoring everyone. It means becoming selective. Selective with your time. Selective with your attention. Selective with your energy. Not everyone deserves full access to you.
And when you give everyone equal access, your value decreases. Because access creates familiarity, and too much familiarity creates disrespect. When you are always available, always understanding, always forgiving, people stop taking you seriously. They assume you will always be there, and that assumption removes urgency. But when you become less available, something shifts. You respond less frequently. You engage less deeply. You stop sharing everything.
You stop reacting emotionally, and suddenly your presence feels different, more controlled, more distant, more valuable. This is not about playing games, it is about protecting your energy. The Stoics believe that your inner state is your responsibility. If you allow others to disturb your emotions easily, you lose control over your own mind. But when you reduce emotional availability, you create a barrier that protects your peace. Now people cannot easily affect you. They cannot trigger you. They cannot manipulate your emotions. And this makes you powerful. Because emotional control is one of the highest forms of strength. When someone realizes they cannot easily reach you emotionally, they begin to behave differently. Either they respect your space or they move away. Both outcomes are beneficial because your peace remains intact. And that is the goal, not to control others, but to control yourself. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself to remain unaffected by the behavior of others, not because people don't matter, but because your inner stability matters more. So the lesson is simple. If your silence is not working, reduce your emotional availability. Because the moment people lose easy access to your emotions, they begin to understand your value. And if they don't, they were never meant to have that access in the first place. Step 5. Be ready to walk away without drama. This is the final and most powerful step. If silence doesn't work, if withdrawing attention doesn't work, if setting boundaries doesn't work, then there's only one thing left. Walk away. Not emotionally, not angrily, not dramatically, calmly. This is where most people fail. They stay longer than they should. They tolerate more than they should. They hope things will change, even when there is no sign of change. Why? Because walking away feels difficult. It feels like loss. It feels like giving up. It feels uncomfortable. But Stoic philosophy teaches a different perspective. Walking away is not weakness. It is self-respect. The Stoics believe that you should not attach yourself to anything that disturbs your inner peace. Not people, not situations, not relationships. If something consistently disrupts your mental stability and disrespects your standards, the logical response is simple. Remove yourself. Marcus Aurelius understood this deeply. He knew that not everyone will understand you, not everyone will respect you, and not every situation is worth fighting for. Some situations are meant to be left. But here is where Stoic thinking becomes powerful. A Stoic does not announce their departure. They do not create drama. They do not try to prove a point. They do not seek revenge. They simply leave silently. Because their goal is not to change the other person, their goal is to protect themselves. This is the difference between emotional people and disciplined people. Emotional people react loudly. They argue, they explain, they try to win. Disciplined people move quietly. They understand that energy is limited and they refuse to waste it on situations that do not deserve it. Walking away sends a message that words never can. It says, I value my peace more than your behavior. And this message is powerful because when access is no longer guaranteed, people begin to feel the shift. They realize you are no longer available. They realize you are no longer reacting. They realize you are no longer trying. And in that moment, the power dynamic changes completely. But here is the most important part. You must be willing to walk away without expecting anything in return. Not for revenge, not to make them miss you, not to prove a point, just for yourself. Because the moment you attach expectations to your decision, you lose control again. True Stoic detachment means you act based on reason, not emotion. You live because it is the right decision, not because you want a reaction. And when you reach this level of clarity, something changes inside you. You stop fearing loss. You stop chasing people. You stop tolerating disrespect. You become stable. And a stable person is powerful because they cannot be easily controlled. So remember this. If your silence is not working, be strong enough to walk away. Not loudly, but with calm certainty. Because sometimes the strongest move you can make is to remove yourself from what no longer respects you. And once you do that, you don't lose anything, you gain yourself back. Silence is powerful, but only when it creates impact. If your silence is ignored, if your presence is taken for granted, if your value is not recognized, then the answer is not more silence. The answer is awareness. Awareness of your value, awareness of your boundaries, awareness of when to step back and when to move on. Stoicism is not about suffering quietly. It is about knowing when to stay calm and when to take control. When you stop chasing, when you control your attention, when you set boundaries, when you reduce emotional access, and when you are ready to walk away, something changes. You stop being easy to ignore. You stop being easy to disrespect. You stop being easy to control. Not because you became aggressive, but because you became clear. And clarity is power. Because at the end of the day, your silence means nothing if your actions don't support it.